Hello, welcome to the Second Button podcast. This is
Hello,
episode 2. La la la.
la
And,
la la.
We're co-hosts. I'm Andrew, and this is
Brian Gower, your Seinfeld recap podcast. You know, we're coming at you. Second episode, second button. What up?
yeah. We're episode 1 is almost ready to come out. So if you're listening to this, you can go back and listen to episode 1.
Yeah. So by the time,
That sounds dumb. Let's cut that out and post it.
yeah, cut that in post, would you? Yeah. By the time this episode comes out, so we've kind of like worked out the little details of when we're going to release. So we're thinking about every other Monday. So we're liking it. We're getting there. So
yeah,
yeah.
it's coming together.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are listening to this, you probably already know all this because you heard the first episode already.
Hopefully, I don't know. Some people may have jumped in. Who knows? Whenever people jump in on podcasts, it's always kind of good to,
Always episode 2. Skip the first one. First one's crap. Always start on episode 2.
Yeah. I know Tone Jerks was like, the first one was like, it's super awkward, but it started getting our stride around 3. So we'll see when we get our stride. I think we're already there, but who knows?
I started listening to you guys about halfway through, a couple years in, or at least a year in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to episode 1. I was like, whoa. It's a whole different scene. Yeah.
The difference, and we're like really meek and like, anyways, I didn't think back then I didn't cut out the long ums and pauses. Anyway, hey, Andrew, how you been? How's it going? Since a couple weeks ago I talked to you. How's it going? What's shaking?
Yeah, things are good. Ate a lot of burgers this weekend. I was saying there earlier, there's a charitable thing going on in Halifax this weekend. And
store-bought burgers?
Yeah, store-bought frozen burgers. There's 112 different places having specialty burgers. So we hit 5 of them on the weekend. So I'm not looking forward to the bathroom break in the morning, but we're...
Barb, that's part of the burger.
That's how we spent our weekend.
There you go. Nothing wrong with that. Get some onion rings, maybe.
I did. Ashley had onion rings.
There you go.
Once, and I had we didn't get fries every time. Sometimes we just got the burger because that's a lot of potato.
Yeah, if you're getting a shitload of the borgs, getting the borgs going.
Yeah. So we did that on the weekend. But last week I did get Seinfeld on DVD used.
Oh yeah. The whole collection, or?
Yeah, the whole collection. It's all in like a book. Like you turn the pages and the DVDs are within each page. It's big collection that way.
Get a Bob Seger on you and turn the page.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some extra stuff on there, and the difference between the Netflix is they don't cut out some of the bottom of the screen that people are complaining about Netflix, which I haven't really noticed much when I was watching.
I couldn't tell you a damn thing about that, but yeah.
I heard the potholes cut out, so I think when we get to that episode, we might notice that there's no pothole when George is talking about the pothole. But besides that, I really don't care if the bottom of the screen's cut off.
The one where he jumps across. Kids making fun of him for sticking the landing or whatever. But I mean, I think you were mentioning that there's a lot of like special features and stuff like that. So that's like back in the day when you would have DVDs. You could watch those special features. Have you watched any of those?
I just rewatched episode 2 and 3 today, and there is a little clip, like a 5-minute clip of people from the show talking about that certain episode. So a couple little tidbits of information there. It's just not overwhelming, but it's something. And then there was a feature too that has a text overlay describing different scenes. I didn't do that because I just want to watch the show. Yeah. I'm not used to reading stuff on TV like you are all the time through your anime.
Yeah.
So
I can't watch something and read at the same time.
So I put it on for one episode, and it was the opening with Jerry doing the stand-up.
Okay, yeah.
It says, warming up the crowd means this. And when they recorded the show, they had a comedian come out and warm up the crowd before he did his bit.
Like pointers or whatever.
Yeah, so and then I turned it off because it was distracting. But
yeah,
it'd be interesting to watch someday, to sit back and kind of get little bits of data from the producers.
Not even just this Seinfeld DVD, but were you one to watch like the special features of DVDs? Was that something that you're like, I'm gonna watch, or are you kind of just like, I'm gonna watch the movie or the show and just?
Yeah, I always watch special features after the movie.
Okay,
and never really did the commentaries and stuff.
Yeah,
I would, but then I just don't, because I'd rather just watch the movie.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really have done that. A friend of mine who I let her borrow also anime like DVDs that I have. She's like, "Oh, did you watch the special features and from this?" I'm like, "No." It's like, she's like, "Oh, well, you own it and you haven't watched it." I'm like, "No, I watched the movie and then put it just on the shelf. Yeah, that's what you do. I'm like, I'd never watched the special features, but it kind of, I think I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about like, oh yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's like, there's some website or whatever streaming service where they started adding like special feature type things on it so you can watch it with the movie. So you click on it and then you can click through special features or add-ons and stuff like that. And then the guy was like, that sounds so stupid. I don't want, why are they going to add that? And it's like, yeah, don't you want to know more about like the movie that you just watched and what they thought about during the parts and maybe like behind the scenes and stuff like that? It's like, instantly I changed my mind. I think it's really cool. Like he said, it was like, that's so stupid. He's like, yeah, no, as you said that, I instantly changed my mind. I take that back. It sounds like a good idea.
I like it now.
Yeah. So maybe for some of these, I gotta go back. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. Get a little Seinfeld in your collection there, the hard copies.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I decided that we're going to watch. Ashley started watching it with me when I started taking my notes for the show.
Yeah.
And then we kind of stalled out waiting. So I think we're just going to watch it right through on Netflix together. And then I'll go back and watch the DVD just to see if I catch anything different.
It's a good move. Good move.
Yeah. Yeah. What's new with you?
I'm trying to think. I'm like, I feel like boring, but it's like work.
Work.
Yeah. And then, I hung out with a friend of ours, IRL, yesterday, RJ Smith from the Just Surprise Me podcast. So it was kind of cool hanging out with him. It's like, yeah,
is that the guy from Teletalks fame?
Yeah, Teletalks Instagram fame. So it's kind of cool hanging out with him and working on just YouTube videos and stuff like that. And I don't know, I think any chance you get to use and hang out with a buddy, obviously. And then I'm like, I don't know, using my gear and stuff like that, and kind of talking to him because he was one of the first guys who I would pick his brain about like camera gear and lighting for videos and stuff like that. So it kind of just seeing like both of us use our cameras and and setting this and frame rates and stuff. It's all nerdy stuff. And then you get to hang out. And then
his videos always look good though.
Yeah, so it's always good fun hanging out with him because I'm like, I talk to him all the time, but I'm like, oh yeah, he lives in San Diego. I'm like, I haven't seen him like at 6-8 months maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of it. So working on YouTube videos and just kind of getting down into a groove of editing. So I think I talked to you off air of like, editing this show. I'm like, I definitely need deadlines, and that's more of a thing like I totally realized about myself. But like once we started doing this podcast, I'm like, when are we going to release it? I don't know. We don't have a day and So I'm like, I can just keep pushing off the editing part of it because there's no deadline. And I'm like, with the Tone Jerks podcast, my other podcast, we have hard dates of like our Patreon episodes come out this day, our main episode comes out here, and then I don't have hard deadlines for my YouTube videos. So I think I'm gonna start I realized I'm like, that's the type of person I am. I have to have those like deadlines in order to get things done because or I'll just be like, yeah, they're always just on
everything's stacked on the back burner.
On the back burner, exactly. That's if nothing's a priority, it won't get done. So yeah, but yeah, that was kind of my week. So a little self realization over there, and then obviously watched episode 2 again today so we can do the podcast. And I took a bunch of notes. And I think you did as well. You want to jump into it?
Yeah. So the gist of the episode is George and Jerry stake out the lobby of an office.
Isn't it the stakeout? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, the stakeout.
Yeah.
Waiting to see a woman that Jerry was interested in that he met at a party that he went to with Elaine.
Yeah.
And that's the gist of the show. So let's get into chatting about it.
Yeah.
Staking out a lobby to see a girl that you were interested in. That's not a thing we would do now. You just stalk them on Facebook and friends of friends and scroll through till you find the person and be like, hey, that's the person.
Well, yeah, it's like maybe part way through the episode is like the dad brings it up of like, go stake out the building that she works at, and then you can maybe run into her because she's got to have lunch, right? And then so when they were going over that, I'm like, that's not a bad idea. I'm like, you'd be like, oh, anyways, but yeah, I guess like as we come back to that, but I guess the show starts out because with the stand-up bit where Jerry is doing stand-up to kind of like, it almost doesn't have anything to do with the show, like the episodes.
I find sometimes it ties in the middle cuts seem to tie in more. The first one is just totally just Jerry just doing Jerry.
Yeah. Which I mean, the jokes are funny because I remember watching it, but they kind of were like, women be like jokes of like
some of them are like that.
Yeah. With this one was like, with checks, women, they can't find their, what was it? Like they could find the checks super easily, but they can't find
their car keys or something.
Car
like
keys,
that.
yeah. Or like they can't find their purse or something like whatever, but the checkbook they have, something like that. It's like just the how quick it's like the quick draw McGraw of like, you know, I have the the check to write something, and then it kind of reminds me of like I haven't written a check since probably 2010. I think I have
God.
Yeah, it's like when would you need that?
I had something where they wanted a blank check. I said, I can just give you the numbers. And they're like, no, I need the blank check. I'm like, I don't have any checks. They're like, you're going to have to get one. I'm like, well, where the fuck am I going to get a check? Like, we'll go to the bank. I'm like, can I just get a check? They're like, no, you can't. We can give you this form with your numbers on it. I was like, they're asking for a blank check. I don't even know where I'd find one of those nowadays. I don't have a checkbook.
Yeah.
Right? So
I was doing some cleaning, and I did find my checkbook, and there was like 5 checks left. And I'm like, I should probably just shred this. This is a liability.
Yeah, you don't need to order more.
Yeah, or I haven't done it yet, but I'm like thinking like, what if I need a check? But it's 2021. I don't think I would.
Yeah, you probably won't.
I work retail, and some people still pay checks.
Do they really?
I'm like, why?
I just haven't seen it forever. Like,
I think
I could see a business, if it's a business account, maybe,
yeah.
But most business accounts, like with hardware stores and stuff, would have an account.
Yeah.
Right? So they would be paying each visit. So
yeah, my old man is definitely one of those guys that pays with checks.
Oh, is he really?
I'm like, you have a checkbook still? He's got in his front pocket. He's got a checkbook and a pen. I'm like, why?
Always in the pocket. Yeah.
He's like, well, and he'll mail checks too. I'm
like to pay the power and stuff? Or?
I think so. I think it was the other day. Like, I'm like, well, you're the one who's keeping this thing going. They probably get him. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, we got to do the check thing still because Brian's dad's writing them still.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyways, but it's kind of funny because like I said, I work at retail. I'm like, it's kind of like I have to like refresh. I'm like, how do I how do I finish the transaction with a check? I'm like, fuck. It's kind of more like,
and even just,
you could just take it. Just take this plate. You can just have it for free. I don't want to process a check.
I don't know how I'd react if I was in line and someone was standing in front of me writing a check and I had to wait for them. I just you kind of get out of there. Today, speaking of the burgers,
yeah,
we're having a stand in line today waiting to order a burger at this place.
Getting the borgs, yeah.
And the side of the building opens up. It's like a walk up counter.
Yeah.
And so this guy is ahead of us, and he wants to know if the buns are vegan. The place is called Chicken Burger. They sell chicken burgers and hamburgers. And he's like, is the bun vegan? And they're like, I don't know. So they went and go to the manager. And the manager comes up, and she's like, I don't know. He goes, what do you mean you don't know? She goes, well, I don't know if they're vegan. I don't know what that entails. So he goes, you have an ingredient list. So she had to go back, find the ingredient list, come back out front, looking through it. And he goes, there's eggs. Eggs make it not vegan. And she goes, okay, so the buns aren't vegan. I can wrap it in lettuce for you, I guess. And he goes, another question. How's your gravy made? And we were there for like 5 minutes. This guy's just, I was like, look it up, man.
Yeah.
Get out of my way.
My drummer is vegetarian. And so some things I don't think about. It's like, like if beans, like if we go get like Mexican food, or in San Diego, so Mexican food is they're everywhere. You throw a rock and you're gonna hit like 20 Mexican taco shops. But he's I have to go to the ones that don't have lard in the beans for the refried beans. And I'm like, I never think about that. I'm like, I never have thought of that.
Yeah, so, I think vegan would be a lot more complicated too than vegetarian, right? But,
yeah. So I think he's just like, no like animal like meats or fats, but I think milk is cool because he does have cheese, and then
so it's not part of the animal, it's just from the animal, I guess.
Yeah, that's vegan is like from the animal. But if it's like part of the animal, like meat, or anyways, now all that.
Shout out to Brian.
Yeah.
What's up?
The intro of the show is a funny joke. It's like, I'm like, oh, that's good, and then I was like, I'm trying to remember the episode. I'm like, because I know it just did the power through. I'm like, what is it? Whatever. And then once it opens up, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It's the opens
starts
up
with Elaine.
Yeah, first episode with Elaine.
Yeah.
And I think this episode was definitely where it felt more like Seinfeld.
Yeah, the opening felt smoother. Mm-hmm. The opening credits felt smoother, and
and then Elaine's in the episode.
Jerry was dressed like Jerry.
Yeah.
And Elaine is there.
Yeah, she's present. Yeah. And then so it opens up with Jerry and Elaine in a video store. Like I think they're doing think it was rental video, or maybe it was like a video.
Yeah, I think it was a rental, I believe. Yeah.
And that makes me think, I'm like, another one aside here. I'm like, oh yeah, do you remember rental videos?
The thing we used to do.
I remember that was like the littest place. It was so fucking sick. And renting video games was another thing I would do. That was kind of more my thing as a kid. I would rent video games, and I was like, oh dude, this is so sick. You got like a weekend to beat the thing. Or get as far
we used to rent the system with the game. You'd rent the whole system. So
my parents wouldn't let me do that. They're like, yeah, no, you're gonna play the fucking SNES because that's what we got you. You're gonna get your mileage out of that.
Yeah, exactly.
But
we used to hang out there for hours, and they'd have the Nintendo set up. We would play that until we got kicked out, and then we'll come back when the shift change happened. We'll play some more and get it again.
Go get some, like, I don't know, like soda or whatever. Come back and just like loiter. That's what you're loitering.
I remember when I was a kid, like 5-6 years old, I'd walk up the street to the grocery store that had a VHS section in the grocery store to rent movies. It was just down the road, and I'll go up there and rent He-Man or something like that.
Or even like
one day I rented the Betamax instead of the VHS, and it was a mess, and I was crying. I didn't know what to do. It didn't fit.
You just shove it in the fucking thing.
I think we had Betamax, I think, and it was the VHS I rented.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm like, this is way too wide to fit in there. I didn't know what to do. I was so confused.
Yeah, no, that was fun.
That was a struggle back then.
I feel like kind of touched on it in episode 1 that we did, but I'm like, this is probably going to be like a remember this type podcast from watching this show. But yeah,
for the first little while anyway.
Yeah, so they have their like setting the scene for the episode of like, oh, I'm going to dinner with my Elaine. So it's like, oh, I'm going to dinner with a friend, and I want you to come with me, or for a friend's birthday. And then Jerry's like, I don't want to go dinner party. And then I don't know.
This is when they bring up the fact they used to date too, right? We find out that they used to be a couple right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then he's like, okay, well, it's like, going to a party alone, dinner party. I'm sure like Elaine was like, okay, that makes sense. Like, bring a friend. And then Jerry's like, okay, well, I'll go if you come with me to a wedding. And it's like, and then that's kind of like okay, I'll do this if you do that.
Yeah.
Then
the wedding stakes are a little bit higher.
Yeah. Well, I think, it's kind of like, oh, his family at least knows her or whatever. And then, and then doesn't it go straight to the dinner party after that? Yeah,
after they
agree to it.
Do the joke about the porn movies. Then
yeah. The porn,
I never had the privilege of going to a video store to rent pornography. That was never a thing I had to do.
We were a Blockbuster family, and I think that was their like hard stance of like they were the non-porno place.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, as a kid, definitely looking for it.
You're peeking around.
Yeah, but no.
Where's that door go? Like it's the bathroom. You're like, oh fuck,
damn it. Yeah.
Then we go to the party, the dinner, and Jerry has his eyes on a woman that has eyes on him, but he's there with his ex, and as much as they say they're friends, they're still that awkwardness. I don't know if I don't have friendly relationships with any of my exes really.
That was one thing I noticed, like it was kind of throughout, and they kind of catch on it at the end there. I'm like, I have never been friends with an ex, and once it's done, it's done. It's like I think I've done it to where it's like, oh, we would break up and then try and go back together, and then obviously that never works. It didn't work for me. I like 2 or 3 times, different relationships.
So you broke up for a reason, right?
Yeah, and then maybe it's like no, for 2 times at least, and then the next time that we break up, I just like pop smoke, gone. You don't see me. I fall off the fucking earth. We never see each other ever again. And I think San Diego at least is a big enough city with enough people that I'm like, I never ran into him ever again.
Oh, really?
Like, I never see him. No.
Yeah, locked out.
Yeah. So I'm like, and then it's like, cause I'm like, I'm not initiating. They don't. So I'm like, we just like, done. And it's like, I'm like, so I'm like, we broke up I don't need to, we don't like each other. We were done. We're not gonna be like, well, we could be friends. I'm like, no, I have plenty of friends.
Yeah, I already have a friend. I already have one of those.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, I'm an adult. I have so many friends, like childhood friends, coworker friends. I have in bands. Like I know people. I'm like, if I wanted, it was like, hey, does anybody want to hang? I could find somebody. I'm like, I don't need to hang out with you.
Yeah.
As mean as that sound. That sounds mean. But
it sounds mean.
Yeah. It's a good setup for a show at least. I'm like, but in reality, at least for I guess both of ours, like you've never really kept up relationships are friendly, or do you run into exes and you're like, oh, we can be friends or friendly? If I would assume,
no, it was never really you break up and then you kind of move on with your life kind of thing.
I would just ignore the person if I saw him in public. I'd be like,
walk past.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, you're there. Okay, anyways, because I'm like, I don't
head nod on the way by.
Just nod, give him a little fucking boom, fuck you, Doughblaze.
So Jerry's talking to this girl, and he's wants to get to know her, but he's being uncomfortable because Elaine's there, and he needs to entertain her as well, and it just gets awkward.
He's trying to flirt. And that was the thing. It's like he's, making conversation, and then he's trying to be funny the whole time. He's like, okay, how can I have an opening here? And then he's whatever, good conversation. And it's like, oh yeah, it's like, if she says something, he has something right back. Obviously it's a show, but he's a comedian, so he probably thinks on his feet a lot. And it's like, oh, why don't you take off your jacket? It's like, oh, I can't, I have a tendency to get cold. That's the whole point of wearing a jacket. And then his joke was like, oh, I don't want to, expose my arms and show off my tattoos.
And trying to be manly now because he gets cold easy.
Yeah. But it's also like, they're at a fancier restaurant. So I think definitely tattoos are not taboo at all anymore.
No,
at all.
No, not like in 1989 they would have been a little more, right?
Yeah, I could even think of like when I started. Like I said, I worked retail, and that's kind of been something I've been doing for a while. Even like they would want you to cover up tattoos just because of like how it looks. Now, nobody cares. Managers have tattoos, piercings, colored hair. It's just the way it is now. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
2021, we have other shit to worry about.
When I first started getting tattoos, it was like shoulders only. You couldn't go down. Even a t-shirt, you couldn't have something peeking through because it would look bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I think hide them all the time.
And then I got my hands, and they were like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna regret that." No, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, no, I really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
I hear people say, "What are you gonna think when you're older and it's all wrinkly?" I'm like, if I'm concerned about a tattoo and I'm old and wrinkly, I don't look good. It's not like I'm gonna look good anyway.
Yeah,
right.
I'm gonna stretch that skin anyways. Yeah, or it's like
exactly.
The Simpsons where he had the fighting hellfish or whatever the hell it was, and he like stretches it to like actually see the tattoo. It's like a folded over blanket. He stretches it to show what it was.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, so it's just like they're having a good back and forth, and Jerry's into her. You can probably tell that maybe she's into him, but he's still feeling it out. I'm like, okay, maybe this can work. And Elaine's right next to him, and then Elaine's like, "Hey, Jerry." He's like, "Ah."
Yeah, he's like, "Oh shit." But then they're stuck in this conversation with Elaine, and he's trying to get out of the conversation politely because the girl's still watching him, so he can't be rude to Elaine. And
it's like,
how do you get out of that conversation? How do you get out of a conversation with a friend without insulting your friend? You want to get out of that conversation.
That's exactly what he's trying to do, and it's funny because I'm like, I don't know. I don't usually do that, especially if I meet somebody at like a bar or whatever, going to see maybe a friend who's in another band. You catch them at a show or whatever. There are some people who are just like scanning the room. Who's another person I can talk to? Who's the next big fish I need to like kind of like network with? And you can almost tell that as the person in the conversation, and you're like, what a dickhead. So you don't want to be that person. And especially Jerry's like, I'm like, a foot away from this person. How can I get out of it? And then somebody said, she's like, I had a dream, Jerry, and you had wooden teeth. And he's like, oh my God, not only is this like a conversation I don't want to be in, it's a shitty conversation.
Yeah. It's just a dumb conversation
about your dream.
Yeah.
It's like, good God. And then like, she gets pulled away because like, oh, hey, Elaine. And then like, he's like, thank you. And he goes right back to talking to the girl. And so like, he's like, quick conversation or whatever, the little dinner party action. And then she leaves. He's like, oh shit, I don't know her name. I don't know who, like anything about her. But she did. Oh,
who's the dude she's with?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh no, she did mention what she does for a living. She mentioned like something about like a lawyer for
in the building she works out of.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm at this place. And then he's mentioned, oh, I'm a comedian. And so he's like, okay, all I know about is like where she works and what she does. And then she left, had to leave early for something. And he's like, I don't know her name. I don't know anything about her. I got no number, nothing. And then she's leaving. He's like just staring at her. She's walking, and then he turns and he's like, Elaine's just staring at him like, you're such a dickhead.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. That's a pretty good scene, kind of setting up that awkwardness dynamic between him and Elaine. You can tell like the dating thing, or like the fact that he's interested in somebody.
Yeah,
and the fact
the
that
first act was a good introduction to Elaine as a character, and she kind of had her character right down from the beginning.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then they even mentioned it's like, oh, are you afraid of her? It's like, well, no, and then kind of, but it's always like that throughout with the different characters of like Kramer, like is intimidated by her, George is, Jerry is, doesn't want to upset her. Yeah, and it's
she's just scary.
Later seasons, George is like, I don't want to upset her. It's like, I'll get to it. It's like, when didn't he had like a Panama hat? She just yanked it down through his head because she was pissed. Anyway, but yeah. So and then it goes back to his apartment, right? His parents are there because I guess
So what's going on in his apartment? Is that where he sleeps in that bed, sitting out in the middle of the living room? Does he have a bedroom?
Yeah, that was one thing
still
I didn't
being pulled together. Yeah,
either. So the room, it was set up differently than episode 1, which is the pilot, and then even different than like how it normally is set up. And it's like the kitchen is a little different, and even some of the angles you can kind of see some where the kitchen counter ends. I don't think I remember ever seeing that. And then more space.
I remember there's an episode later on where he gets a renovation done and the whole kitchen becomes huge and they cut it away. I think that might be when the change happens, but I can't remember how far in that is.
Yeah.
But there's no cereal boxes right now. I know that much. They don't have the cereal boxes on the shelf. And that's kind of a staple. So that must happen.
And no Superman
soon.
Figures, Godzilla figures, like just like the things of like Jerry is like an adult and like a grown man, but he still has like the DC comics and the stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I can relate to that. I have like
if you guys see the videos we're looking at of each other right now.
Maybe mine are maybe a little bit, I don't have the good angle, but I'm like, oh, I have like anime figures and stuff like that and concert posters and shit like that. It's like, it's like, I guess that's like not like an adult, a fancy adult,
And my whole room here is Star Wars like Transformers and He-Man and
guitars and cool shit. But so the set of Jerry's apartment isn't quite there yet, but it's closer than I think episode 1 was. And it was kind of weird because his parents were sitting there in like a pull-out couch, or was it like a bed? That was like a
bed just right there in the.
So it's like a studio apartment, but later on it's like a 1-bedroom apartment. So
I think still in this episode, the bathroom's kind of off that main room.
Yeah.
But then later on, they create a hallway. They push that wall back.
Yeah, to where
it
has
a hallway to make it look like there's a bedroom and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this one he just had a studio. So that's his bed and living room and kitchen are all in one shot. So that's what his parents were there in the bed. And it's like, oh, yeah, I know I'm staying with Kramer. And that's when they called him Kramer.
Yeah.
And so they're having their conversation and then brings up Elaine or whatever. It doesn't even like mentions about like, oh, this girl that he met or whatever, but he doesn't have any way to talk to her. Or no, the mom mentions Elaine. It's coming to and then it's like, oh, what was the problem with you and Elaine and stuff like that. And the mom was like,
doesn't want to ask Elaine where the girl works. And then she's like, why can't you ask Elaine?
Yeah.
They're an item, and then
like, oh, why weren't you a thing? She was whatever. And it's like, why didn't it work out? And the mom's like, oh, I know why it didn't work out. Kind of like, like some kind of like, sex thing or whatever. And then Jerry's like, I don't know. It's just like we argued all the time. And then the parents like that, like, well, that's marriage for you. Bah, 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 bah. That kind of like that trope. And
takes a jabs at his own wife.
They look at each other. And then he goes into like, oh, we argued all the time and we weren't compatible like physically. And that's when they start, it's the mom's like, oh no, I don't want to hear this.
She looks down, picks some lint off her nightgown and shit. And
so that was pretty funny. Like the dynamic's already there of like just the nagging parents that are always like asking him questions, picking into his life. And then like they do that throughout the series.
Yeah.
Want to know too much. And then when they hear information, they're like, oh, wow. And then they react like, oh, you didn't have to tell me that. You asked.
And that seems kind of real, right? I don't talk to my parents about my sexual relationship.
Yeah, not at all.
Not a conversation.
Yeah, not at all. It's just like, oh, no. Exactly.
But in the DVD special features, a little blip there, Jerry's mom came in and auditioned. She said she came in, she smiled at Jerry, he smiled back. She said, I'm a fan. He said, thank you. She did her audition, and before she got home, she had the job. It was just like, she just fit.
Yeah, she was.
And she was the nosy neighbor from Elf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I made that connection before, and I was watching like, how do I know her from something else? Like, obviously I knew her from Seinfeld, but yeah, she was on Elf. She was the neighbor that was always trying to figure out what this alien was doing living in the house next door.
Yeah. And then the dad was different. That's a different dad than Morty.
Yeah.
Later on. I think it's also George's dad is different too whenever he comes into the series. So they had a different dad for both Jerry and George. But
yeah.
So they're going on the thing, and that's when the dad had mentioned the whole like, oh, well, you know where she works. Why don't you, or he's asking the dad of like, oh yeah. I think it starts off with him asking the dad of like, oh, how many people work at law firms?
Yeah, that's how we started the conversation.
It really depends, and that's kind of how they brought that. But he brings it back to, the dad says like, oh, why don't you just go to the building that she works at during her like around lunch? She has to have
lunch at some point.
Yeah, she has to have lunch. I'm like, well, what if she brought a sack lunch?
He's outside all day.
Yeah, or she's not coming. Yeah, he'll be waiting all day. But yeah, he's like, oh, that's actually not a bad idea. And even like I said, I'm like, that's not really that bad of an idea.
I was thinking too, like the mom was like, that's a stupid idea.
Yeah,
but we're all like, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, maybe it's
stupid men, so maybe we're just fucking like, dumb.
Yeah, okay. If you just sometimes he's like, oh, you got to be face to face. That's the idea is to like get that second meetup, and then you're like, okay, I can get the info that I need, even if it's just like a pass by, even if it's just a 5-minute thing. Like, oh, I'm here. And so they make up the story. He brings George. They're there.
It would have been much easier if you just asked Elaine, said, hey, who was that girl? Hook us up.
Oh, that was also.
He's uncomfortable with it. Yeah.
That kind of brings the whole thing of like, the awkward conversations. So him and George are there now at the stakeout, which I'm like, that's not a bad idea. It's pretty good. I'm like, solid plan for sure.
And that was the one other point that they made in the special features there. Larry David actually did that. He was interested in a girl. He knew where she worked, and he hung out at lunchtime waiting for her to come downstairs. That's where he got the idea for the whole episode. So it's a real thing that he actually did. So
okay, yeah, that's why I'm like, that sounds like it could work. It sounds like it totally could work. But yeah, so they're there waiting, and then George and him are like, okay, well, why are we here? I'm like, oh, let's just say we're meeting a friend for lunch. I'm like, that's still, even as I was like watching, like, solid plan still. It's a good idea.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Oh, we're meeting a friend, because that could be enough to be like, oh, we're meeting a friend. She's like, oh, I'm gonna go to lunch. I'm like, okay, we're gonna go see my friend. Hey, can I, maybe try and get a number, try and get whatever. And then he still didn't know her name, so that's when like he was like, they didn't do this one, but it's like, oh, a good way to just like introduce George. It's like, oh, hi, I'm blank, and that's what does happen. So that's where Jerry gets the name, and then. But before,
and that's a solid move. I use that move myself. If someone at work that I recognize and like I don't remember their name, and I'm with a new partner or something, I introduce my partner. They introduce themselves. I'm like, perfect. I got your name. I'll forget it 5 minutes later, but I have it for the next 5 minutes.
I definitely forget people's names. Like there's people who have like very similar names, like Julia. I'm like, oh god damn it. It's like, hey, you, and
hey,
then
Jules,
and then I'm like. Look at like a name tag that they're wearing, and I'm like, I can't do that like all the time because I'm just like staring, and then I look at they're gonna know that I'm like, I don't know their name.
Yeah.
So sometimes I take a shot and it's like the wrong one. I'm like, or like there's like people that they almost look like I don't know, super similar as like maybe like clones or variations of the same person. Where it's like
they're doppelgangers.
The features that I know of you of like, okay, you have like the same length brown curly hair and you're like random names that don't stand out. I'm like, I keep fucking them up all the time. So I'm just like, hey, you, how's it going?
Yeah.
You start doing that. There's gonna be a point where they're like, Brian's just an asshole. He doesn't even call me by my name.
He just calls me you.
Hey,
he thinks my
what's
name's
up?
you.
How's it going? And then you get a chance to like stare at the name tag. Got it. Boom. And then you can say, yeah, call him by the name, be personable. But yeah, anyways.
But a name we'll never forget. They're in the lobby trying to discuss how they're there, why they're there, who they're meeting, and the creation of Art Vandelay, which keeps coming back throughout the whole series.
Yeah, that's an awesome one. It's like Vandelay Industries and throughout throughout the series, but they're like, it was going to be like Art Corvalet. And then George freaks out because he's like, this is his chance to like, just act a little bit, George. All you need to say, just follow the lie that we're meeting Art Corvalet and nothing else. It's like, well, who am I? You're George. And he starts freaking out and she's walking over. Oh no. Oh, what do I do? No, let me be the architect. Because it was like the thing too. He's like, oh, I'll just make up a job for me. I'm like, that's unnecessary. You could just be George. The
just
real
adding
estate.
to the lie to make it complicated.
Yeah, real estate agent. He's adding details that don't need to be there, and so he goes, and then George jumps in and just starts saying all these things like, "All right, we're meeting our friend Art Corvallis. It's like Vandalay. And then she gets close. It's like, hey, that's the other party. I can't remember, Vanessa party or whatever. Whatever the person's name was. He's like, hey, I know you. I saw you at the party the other day. It's like, oh, wow, okay. And then he's playing along. It's like, oh, like that. It's all just a random bumping. And it's going on well. And then he's like, oh, I'm meeting, he introduces like, oh, it's my buddy George. And like, I don't remember her name, but yeah, she says her name. And then like, that's where you get it.
See, we don't remember names. See?
Yeah. So yeah. It's going good. And then she's like, oh, and then George bumps it. And I'm George, it's like, I'm an architect. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm an architect.
It's like, oh, what have you done?
For no reason.
Railroads. Isn't that for engineers? No, sometimes. And then he just,
they can.
He totally
they can.
just, and then they say they're meeting their buddy Art Vandelay, and that's when they get vague. He's like, what does he do? He's, I don't know where he works, which that could be something if you don't know the company
importing
that your buddy
and
works.
exporting.
Yeah. He's like, oh, he's an importer, exporter, and then they leave it at that. And that's where like she says like, oh, I had to leave early, because my cousin had something going on. He's like, oh, your cousin, got it. And then Jerry just like sidesteps right in front of George and kind of bumps him out of the conversation. It's like, now I'm working here. We're working. And George's like, I'll go get a coffee.
George actually picked up on it, which doesn't seem like something George would pick up on normally.
But it ended up working, so that was kind of funny. And then it says like, I guess the next scene, he's back at his apartment and he gets like relayed a message that the Elaine left with his mom. He's playing Scrabble or something. And then Kramer comes in just to kind of like, some comedic effect of like made up words to try and help the mom and stuff like that. And then it's that the mom, the message that she relays is like, oh yeah, Elaine said, hey, talking about the wedding. And then hopefully your lunch went well with Art Vandelay. He's like, what?
He's like, shit.
So made it super awkward. So instead of asking Elaine for that person's name and number or whatever for a date that he was obviously interested in, Elaine could tell, he just went a crazy story, I guess. Not for us, but to do all that, to bring George, make up a story, bring this, and to for that interaction, he was all like, wow, now this is even more awkward. It's like Elaine knows
now she
what
knows
I
that
did.
he was avoiding.
Yeah, what I was avoiding to talk to her, and of
course Jerry playing Scrabble with his mom. She's looking up words in the dictionary to see what she can use and cheating. And just. But, I don't think I've ever played a game like that, board game, where it didn't turn into someone cheating over something like that, right?
Yeah. The mom, like, I have to get this. Yeah. I don't really play board games that much. I'm like trying to think.
We do once in a while. When we first moved to our new house, we had no internet for weeks. We played board games like every day, and then we didn't really since then. But it's always something I want to do. We just never actually do it.
Yeah. I like chess. I think it's probably one of the ones that I like the most. I remember I guess like it's super, I guess once you learn it, it's like, I don't know, tons of fun. You can keep going and it's different every single time. Play
quick
with
rounds kind of.
Mm-hmm. Or if you really suck. It's funny because I'm like, we used to play that like at an age that we shouldn't have been. Like we were really into it. Like my friends, we would play chess and just hang out. We were like in 5th grade.
Yeah, my son was in chess club at school. Like there's a lunchtime chess thing, and he played, and I still don't know how to play. I just never sat down and figured it out.
Yeah. See, I know how to play chess. Not to say that I'm good at it. I mean, sometimes I'll fucking crush. I have it on my phone. I'll kill the computer. I got it on easy mode. On easy mode. Those really difficult ones. I'm like, oh my god. Like, how did you beat me in like 5 moves? But yeah, I never learned how to play checkers. Still don't know how to play checkers. And I think that's one.
Checkers is a lot easier.
That's what I heard. Yeah, it's supposed to be
yeah.
easy, and I'm like, I have no idea how that works. I don't know if you. But anyways, so they're playing the board game. I think it cuts to the next scene. Where
they had the written note, and she says about the family. He goes, well, how did she say it? She goes, I don't know.
What else did she say? Yeah.
It's hard to read what someone wrote and understand the message because inflection and everything means something. same as today. Like,
like
if
text,
if you're texting someone might get offended by something you said that you didn't even say because they read it a different way from what you wrote it. You know what I mean?
Or if you do, you're trying to go pretty fast and you do like a mistype or misspelling, and it autocorrects to something else. You're like, oh, that's not even close to what I had to say. And you gotta go.
I was saying to duck yourself. That's what I was saying.
Yeah. But yeah, so then he's like, well, what else did she say? He's like, whatever's on the message. They're going that little bickering back and forth between them. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then it does cut back to where he has to meet Elaine. It's like, oh, well, this is going to be awkward at the house or back at, Jerry's apartment, getting ready to go to the wedding. And this is where it's like kind of brings people. It's like, oh, where it cuts into like, people talking to Jerry about like, where I work, that's where you would get really good material. If you went there to see my friends and that would be really funny. And everybody's just like bantering with him, like, oh, well, I got some good stories for you. If you want to, put it in your act. And it's like, I have a friend who's a comedian, and he gets like shit like that all the time about well, it's like he's like if he's in San Diego and he meets somebody new, I'm like, oh, he's a comedian. I'm like, oh, well, tell a joke. No, that doesn't work like that. It's not
the same as playing guitar. Someone's like, you play guitar, and they're at a party. You play a song. I'm like, I'm not just going to play a song at a party. It's just not...
you play to something, and even like when you're doing a joke, it can't just be. Most of the time, they're not just like street jokes. Like, here's a knock knock joke where the trick can cross the road. They aren't like that. Most comics
there's a build up, and they come back to it, and it's
they're usually like funny stories that are building up. Yeah. Very rarely do like comedians just like tell street jokes, and sometimes people do, and or like open micers will tell like street jokes pretty much. I'm like, they're not like professional or like even like comedians who are getting paid. They're maybe just be like, oh, I do this for fun, or I'm like the funny guy at the office. So it just kind of reminded me. I'm like, oh yeah, I know, buddy. Train, he gets that where people are like, oh, he's a comedian. Well, he better be funny. I'm like, he's not on all the time.
Yeah, he's not always working.
Yeah, or if it's like, oh man, this guy is a comedian. Oh man, he's gonna be telling jokes the whole time. Like, what the? They'd be like, oh, you're a drummer. You're just gonna be hitting drums all the time.
You're tapping your pencils on the desk.
Sometimes, sometimes they do. Yeah, they won't just like, can you fucking stop at sound check. For guitar, you don't need to be like, I'm like, okay, gone with the drum roll, dude. But anyways, it's just kind of like that little setup there. He's getting his family just telling him like jokes and bits and stuff like that. You should do this. I mean, give you a pointer about that. He's like, I'm doing it already. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, so then Elaine comes in, and that's where he already knows like, oh, this is gonna be awkward. So kind of like confronts her about like, it's like, oh, well, we're going to just do this now. And then they started talking about like how awkward that was of like, doing the, not talking to her, even though that was the easiest way to get that chick's number was asking Elaine. But he didn't do that. He went all around the world to get to that same outcome.
Just to make it less awkward. And then he had the awkward conversation anyway.
Yeah.
So.
And then, then they kind of say like, well, we're friends now. We could still talk about that. And it's like, oh yeah. And then it kind of ends with Elaine saying like, well, I've met somebody. And then it's like, oh, I'm interested in somebody. And he could tell he's getting a little awkward about it now. It's like, it's like, oh, he's good.
The tide turned.
Let's just say he's good looking. He's like, oh, good looking guy, huh? And he's like, and he's funny. He's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like
pushing it now.
Comparing of like, oh yeah, back when, this guy is different than you. Cause that's usually the thing that's like the, I don't know, was it the elephant in the room there? It's like, oh yeah, well, we used to date. And now you're like almost not like they do, but they can compare each other. Like, oh yeah, well, this person is like this and you're like that. That's probably what they're trying to avoid. And she just like kind of hits it on the head of like, that's the joke or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it ends. And it's kind of it, right?
Yeah.
And then so it set the scene of like all the relationships with the people. So you can tell the parents too, with Elaine, and then kind of like added Kramer is just like, he's just going to come in and be funny. And then he'll be out of there. Yeah.
It really seemed to start forming the relationships more between everyone.
Yeah.
Jerry's mom is more hands-on with her parenting, and the dad's more hands-off kind of.
Yeah.
He's there to make little wisecracks on the side, and Yeah, like I said, Kramer comes in for the bits.
Yeah. The funny parts. He was less awkward than the first time. Episode 1, he was like more of just kind of like, he was the awkward neighbor. And this one, he's like funny. Like you could tell, like, oh, the mom and him have a good relationship. Like, oh, he knows the family and stuff like that. He's just like, he's like a friend. He's a neighbor. He's a friend.
Yeah.
So,
and he was helping her cheat on Scrabble. He was speaking over Jerry's tiles and shit.
Yeah. So no, it was a good episode. Definitely felt more Seinfeld to me. I liked it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. This seemed to work out where, I don't know. We'll see with every episode, but I'm like, yeah, I think we're good for maybe this episode just being about episode 2. What do you say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Because
I think we can do one per.
We'll see where we are. Like, I'll maybe if we'd have to do 2 or 3 for an episode, but I'm like, yeah, I feel like there's a lot to just like stretch on, just reflecting on the show. Yeah, these are fun to go back and watch again. Like, even though like in the past like 2 weeks I've seen this episode twice,
I still laugh the whole time.
No regrets.
I was forgetting to take notes for a little while there. I was still laughing so much at the.
Yeah, I was
something I watched last week.
Yeah, I've got little notes on my phone. I was watching it. Yeah, this earlier today. I was on the elliptical, just fucking giving that thing hell. I was
just
like
destroying the elliptical.
Yeah, the thing was smoking by the time I left, and I was just like able to like watch the show and then leave notes on my phone while I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, this is great. So yeah, I like this format. We'll see how it goes. Like, we kind of talk about the episode and then things that we notice or whatever. But yeah, let's
give us some feedback if anyone has any suggestions.
So
we might not listen to you, but we'll try to.
Yeah. So I guess the easiest way to get a hold of us is on Instagram. It's the @secondbutton podcast.
Yes.
So give us a follow over there. Subscribe to this. Hopefully by the time this is out, it's on all like the major podcast sites. And so we'll continue doing.
Some of the podcast sites there's a waiting period while they review and make sure that it's
iTunes
okay
might be like
a
couple of days, couple of weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as of right now, we're gonna release it every other Monday. So when this comes out, it'll be 2 weeks after that. So yeah, let's get on out of here. Andrew, thanks for watching it with me. We got to figure out a way we can maybe stream it to where we both watch it at the same time.
Yes, we can figure that out.
Maybe we can do some Twitch or something like that. But we're today is like we added video and just like for us talking, and I find it so much better because I'm like I don't step on you when you're talking.
It's like we're talking to each other now.
Yeah. So technology, it's great. But I think we don't have a proper sign off. But we'll talk to you next time. Bye, people.
Bye.
That's how you don't get a copyright strike.
There we go. Bye.
Bye.